The first time Lieutenant Commander Zara Voss heard the call sign Ghost, she was bleeding out in the cockpit of her damaged fighter, 3 parsecs from the nearest human outpost. The Catherine battlecruiser had torn through her squadron like tissue paper, leaving her as the sole survivor drifting in the void between stars. Her communications array crackled with static before a voice cut through the interference, clear, calm, and entirely human despite the impossible distance from any known fleet position. "This is Ghost. I have visual on your position. Prepare for emergency extraction." Zara's instruments detected nothing. No ships, no energy signatures, just the cold darkness of space and the growing radiation leak from her dying fighter. She was hallucinating, had to be. Oxygen deprivation was making her hear things. Then something impossible happened. A sleek vessel materialized from what seemed like empty space, its hull reflecting the distant starlight like polished obsidian. The ship was unlike anything in the human fleet registry. No sharp angles or brutal efficiency of military design. Instead, it flowed like liquid metal, organic curves that seemed to shift and pulse with their own inner light. "Ghost, this is Lieutenant Commander Voss. I don't show you on any sensors. What's your ship designation?" Silence stretched across the comm channel before the response came. "Designation irrelevant. Preparing docking clamps." The mysterious vessel moved with impossible grace, mechanical arms extending to secure Zara's crippled fighter. She felt the gentle thrum of artificial gravity as her ship was drawn into what appeared to be a spacious hangar bay. Through her canopy, she glimpsed technology that seemed decades ahead of anything humanity had developed. When the hangar pressurized, a figure approached her fighter. Human in silhouette but moving with an eerie fluidity that made Zara's skin crawl. The person wore a flight suit that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, and their helmet's faceplate remained opaque even as they helped her from the cockpit. "You're injured," the figure observed. The voice was definitely female, though distorted by whatever technology filtered through the helmet. "Medical bay is this way." Zara stumbled, her leg giving out where shrapnel had torn through her suit. Without hesitation, the stranger caught her, supporting her weight with surprising strength. They moved through corridors that hummed with energy, walls displaying what looked like star charts but showing constellations Zara didn't recognize. The medical bay was a wonder of advanced technology. Diagnostic beams played over Zara's injuries while automated surgical arms worked with precision no human surgeon could match. Throughout the procedure, her rescuer remained silent, standing vigil by the doorway. "Who are you?" Zara finally asked as the medical systems finished their work. "I've never seen this ship class before. Are you with special operations?" The helmet turned toward her, and for a moment Zara thought she saw a glimmer of something human behind the dark faceplate. "Pain, maybe? Or longing?" "I'm someone who was lost and found purpose in protecting others," came the cryptic reply. "Your injuries are healed. I'll return you to the nearest human settlement." Before Zara could ask more questions, she found herself back in her fighter, its systems mysteriously repaired and fuel cells recharged to full capacity. The strange ship's hangar bay opened to reveal space once more. "Ghost, wait," Zara called over the comm. "At least tell me your real name." The response came as her fighter was gently ejected from the mysterious vessel. "Names are for people who belong somewhere. Just remember the call sign." Zara watched in amazement as the ship seemed to fold in on itself, vanishing from both visual and sensor contact, as if it had never existed. Her navigation computer showed she was somehow only an hour's flight from Kepler Station, though by her calculations she should have been days away. When she reported the incident to Fleet Intelligence, their response was predictable. No record of any ship matching her description. No pilot named Ghost in any database. Her damaged flight recorder had mysteriously corrupted, showing only static during the time of her rescue. They chalked it up to combat stress and oxygen deprivation, hallucinations brought on by trauma. Zara didn't argue. She'd learned early in her career that some truths were too strange for official reports. But 3 weeks later, when the Catherine launched their surprise assault on the Proxima colonies, Ghost appeared again. This time, Zara was commanding the defense of Proxima 3 when enemy forces broke through the orbital defenses. The situation was hopeless. 12 Catherine battlecruisers against her small patrol fleet, evacuation ships full of civilians streaming away from the planet while her pilots bought time with their lives. Then the impossible ship materialized in the heart of the enemy formation. This is Ghost to all human vessels. the familiar voice announced across all frequencies. Break off your attack runs and provide cover for the evacuation fleet. I'll handle the cruisers. Zara watched in stunned silence as the mysterious vessel engaged all 12 enemy ships simultaneously. It moved like it was dancing, weaving between plasma bolts and missile volleys with impossible grace. Its weapons were unlike anything in human or Kethran arsenals. Beams of coherent energy that sliced through enemy hulls like they were made of paper. In less than 10 minutes, 8 Kethran cruisers were nothing but expanding clouds of debris. The remaining 4 retreated in disorder, broadcasting frantic warnings about human superweapons. "Ghost, this is Commander Voss," Zara transmitted. "Please respond." "Who are you, really?" The reply came as the strange ship began to fade from sensors once more. "I'm just someone keeping a promise. Keep your people safe, Commander. This war is far from over." As word of the mysterious defender spread through human space, a legend was born. Ghost became a call sign whispered in pilot briefings and refugee camps. Some claimed she was an experimental AI given form. Others believed she was humanity's guardian angel, watching over them from the darkness between stars. But Zara knew better. Whoever Ghost really was, she was human. Lost, perhaps. Changed by something beyond understanding. But human nonetheless. And somewhere out there in the vast emptiness of space, she was still fighting a war that no one else even knew existed. The Kethran High Command called an emergency session after the Proxima incident. Admiral Kekstar, supreme commander of their invasion fleet, stood before the War Council with his pride in tatters and his reputation hanging by a thread. The holographic display showed the aftermath of what should have been a simple colony raid. "Explain," growled War Master Thane, his 4 arms gesturing at the wreckage data.
"How does a single human vessel destroy 8 battlecruisers?"
Kekstar's mandibles clicked nervously. The ship appeared from nowhere. Our sensors detected no approach vector, no energy signature prior to engagement. It moved with impossible speed and agility. "Impossible is not acceptable." Thane's voice carried the weight of authority that had crushed a dozen species under Kethran rule. "You allowed fear to cloud your judgment." "With respect, War Master, I reviewed the battle recordings myself. This was no ordinary human vessel. The technology displayed was beyond anything in their current arsenal." Thane studied the tactical displays, his predator's mind analyzing the attack patterns. The mysterious ship had used precision strikes, targeting critical systems rather than simply overwhelming the cruisers with firepower. It fought like someone who understood Kethran ship design better than the Kethrans themselves. "Increase patrols along the human border," he decided. "This ghost will appear again. When it does, we will be ready." Meanwhile, deep in human space, Fleet Admiral Sarah Chen was having her own crisis of faith. Intelligence reports flooded her desk, each one describing impossible encounters with a ship that shouldn't exist. The ghost sightings were becoming more frequent, and the Kethran response was growing increasingly aggressive. "Ma'am," her aide interrupted her thoughts. "Commander Voss is here for the debrief." Zara entered the Admiral's office looking every inch the professional officer, but Chen had learned to read between the lines. The young commander had been present at 2 ghost encounters now, and both times her reports had been frustratingly vague. "Commander, I need the truth," Chen said without preamble. "This ghost pilot is operating advanced technology in human space without authorization. That makes them either a security threat or a valuable asset. Either way, I need to know who they really are." Zara maintained her composure, but Chen caught the slight hesitation before she spoke. "Admiral, I've told you everything I observed. The ship is beyond our current capabilities. The pilot refuses to identify themselves, and their interventions have saved human lives. That's not what I'm asking, and you know it." Chen leaned forward. "You've had direct contact with this pilot. Personal conversation. What's your assessment of their intentions?" For a moment, Zara's professional mask slipped. Chen saw something flicker across her face. "Protectiveness, maybe. Or loyalty. I believe they're human, Admiral, and I believe they're on our side." Before Chen could press further, alarms began wailing throughout the station. Emergency lights bathed the office in red as the communications officer's voice echoed through the complex. "All hands to battle stations. Kethran fleet detected at the edge of the system. Multiple battle cruisers inbound." Chen and Zara rushed to the command center where tactical displays showed a nightmare scenario. 15 Kethran vessels had dropped out of hyperspace at the system's edge. But these weren't the usual raiding forces. These were heavy assault ships built for one purpose: total system destruction. "They're not targeting our colonies," the tactical officer reported. "They're spreading out in a search pattern." Chen understood immediately. "They're hunting for Ghost." The Catherine fleet began a systematic sweep of the system, their sensors probing every asteroid belt and nebula. They deployed gravity mines at jump points and positioned interdiction fields around the major planets. Whatever their plan, they were prepared to wait. For 6 hours, nothing happened. Human defense forces maintained their positions while the Catherine ships continued their search pattern. Then, just as the tension was becoming unbearable, space itself seemed to ripple near the outer rim. The Ghost ship materialized like a predator emerging from tall grass, its dark hull catching and reflecting the light of the distant sun. It hung motionless for a moment as if considering the odds. 15-1, someone whispered in the command center. "They're insane to engage." But Ghost didn't engage. Instead, the mysterious vessel began broadcasting on all frequencies, its transmission cutting through Catherine jamming like it didn't exist. "Catherine forces, this is Ghost. You're looking for me. Here I am." Admiral Kekstar's response came immediately. "Surrender your vessel and prepare to be boarded. You will answer for the destruction of our fleet elements." The laugh that came over the comm sent chills down Zara's spine. It was bitter, tired, and utterly human. "I've been answering for things my whole life, Admiral, but not today." What happened next defied every principle of space combat doctrine. Ghost didn't attack the Catherine fleet. Instead, the ship simply vanished again, reappearing moments later behind the enemy formation. But this time it wasn't alone. 6 identical vessels materialized around the Catherine fleet, their dark hulls gleaming with the same impossible technology. The enemy ships found themselves surrounded by Ghost vessels, each one moving with the same fluid grace as the original. "Multiple contacts," the tactical officer reported in amazement, "all showing identical energy signatures to the original Ghost ship." Chen felt her blood run cold. If humanity faced not 1 but 7 ships with such advanced technology, the balance of power in this war had just shifted dramatically. The battle that followed was unlike anything in recorded military history. The Ghost ships moved in perfect coordination, their attacks synchronized to the microsecond. They didn't just fight the Catherine fleet. They dismantled it with surgical precision. Energy beams lanced out from the mysterious vessels, each shot finding critical systems with impossible accuracy. Catherine shields collapsed under weapons fire that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Within minutes, the enemy fleet was reduced to helpless hulks drifting in space. But then something unexpected happened. Instead of destroying the disabled ships, the Ghost vessels simply stopped firing. They held position around the crippled fleet like guards waiting for something. The original Ghost ship moved closer to Admiral Kekstar's flagship and opened a communication channel. "Admiral, you came here looking for answers," the voice said. "I'm going to give you one. Tell your war council that humanity has guardians they don't understand. Tell them that this war can end whenever they choose to make it end." "What are you?" Kekstar's voice was barely a whisper. "I'm what happens when someone loses everything and finds something worth protecting," came the reply. "Remember that." The Ghost ships began to fade from sensors, but not before one final transmission reached the human command center. "Commander Voss, Admiral Chen, the enemy will regroup and return in greater numbers. Prepare your defenses." This was just the beginning. As the mysterious vessels vanished into the void, leaving the crippled Catherine fleet to limp home, Admiral Chen turned to Zara with questions burning in her eyes. "Commander, whoever Ghost really is, they just escalated this conflict beyond anything we're prepared for. The Catherines will be back, and they'll bring everything they have." Zara nodded grimly, her mind already working through defensive strategies. But part of her wondered if Ghost understood what she'd just set in motion. The war was about to become something far more terrible than either side had imagined. Dr. Elena Vasquez had spent 3 decades studying xenobiology and first contact protocols, but nothing in her extensive research had prepared her for what arrived at Research Station Omega in the deep void between star systems. The automated distress beacon had been broadcasting for only 6 hours. When Ghost materialized near the station like a shadow gaining substance, "This is Ghost requesting permission to dock," the familiar voice transmitted. "I have wounded that require immediate medical attention." Elena's hands trembled as she granted docking permission. The legends surrounding Ghost had reached even the remote research outposts, but seeing the impossible vessel approach through the observation port left her speechless. Its hull seemed to drink in the starlight, and the way it moved suggested technology that defied her understanding of physics. When the airlock sealed and the mysterious pilot emerged, Elena's breath caught in her throat. The figure was definitely human, but something was profoundly wrong. The environmental suit they wore wasn't like any design in the human fleet. It seemed to shift and flow like living tissue, and where the helmet should have been transparent, only darkness remained. "I need your surgical facilities," Ghost said without preamble, "and your discretion." Elena led them through the station corridors, noting how Ghost moved with careful precision, as if they were carrying something infinitely precious. In the medical bay, Elena watched in amazement as the pilot activated what appeared to be a portable stasis field, revealing its contents. Inside the energy barrier lay a young girl, perhaps 8 years old, her skin pale as moonlight and her breathing shallow, but it was her eyes that made Elena gasp. They were solid black from lid to lid, like looking into the depths of space itself. "What happened to her?" Elena whispered. "The same thing that happened to me," Ghost replied, their voice carrying layers of pain that no amount of electronic distortion could hide. "She was in the wrong place when humanity first encountered something it shouldn't have." Ghost began activating medical equipment that Elena didn't recognize, devices that had clearly been integrated into the station's systems without her knowledge. The technology worked with impossible efficiency, scanners revealing cellular damage that looked almost like radiation poisoning, but with patterns Elena had never seen before. "I've been searching for others like us for 2 years," Ghost continued, their hands moving with practiced skill over the alien medical devices. "The girl's name is Sarah. Her colony was attacked by something worse than the Kethrans, something that changes people." Elena watched as the mysterious equipment began treatment protocols that seemed to work on quantum levels. The girl's vital signs strengthened, her breathing deepened, but those terrible black eyes remained unchanged. "Ghost, what are you talking about? What attacked her colony?" The pilot paused in their work, and Elena sensed them weighing how much truth she could handle. 5 years ago, I was Lieutenant Commander Rebecca Mason, test pilot for the Experimental Deep Space Reconnaissance Program. We encountered something at the edge of the galaxy. Something ancient and hungry. Elena felt her world shift as pieces of a puzzle she hadn't even known existed began falling into place. Rebecca Mason had been declared missing in action after her experimental vessel vanished during a classified mission. The official reports claimed equipment failure, but Elena remembered the rumors that had circulated through the scientific community. The entity called itself the Devourer, Ghost continued. It feeds on sentient life, not just consuming flesh, but absorbing consciousness itself. It changed us, Sarah and me and others we're still looking for, made us into something between human and something else. The medical display showed Sarah's condition stabilizing, but Elena noticed something else. The girl's cellular structure was unlike anything in human medical textbooks. Her DNA had been altered at the most fundamental level, rewritten by forces beyond current scientific understanding. "The abilities you've demonstrated," Elena said slowly. "The impossible technology, the way your ship moves. That's what it did to you? The Devourer intended us to be its servants, scouts for the coming invasion, but it underestimated human stubbornness." Ghost's voice carried a note of grim humor. "We broke free from its control, but we retained the gifts it gave us. Enhanced perception, technology that responds to thought rather than programming, the ability to exist partially outside normal space-time." Elena's scientific mind raced with the implications. "How many others are there?" "I've found 6 so far, including Sarah. All of us were changed, all of us escaped before the transformation was complete. But Elena, there are thousands more who weren't so lucky. They're still out there, still under the Devourer's influence, preparing for its arrival." The girl on the medical table stirred, her black eyes opening to focus on Ghost with recognition and relief. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that seemed to resonate in dimensions Elena couldn't see. "Rebecca, I dreamed about the dark ships again. They're coming." Ghost moved to the girl's side with protective tenderness. "I know, little star, but we're going to stop them." Elena watched the interaction with growing understanding. Ghost wasn't just a mysterious defender fighting the Kethran War. She was preparing for something far worse. gathering others like herself for a battle that would determine the fate of all sentient life in the galaxy. The Kethrans, Elena said suddenly. They're not the real threat, are they? The Kethrans are aggressive but ultimately rational, Ghost confirmed. They can be reasoned with, defeated, or made allies. The Devourer represents something else entirely. It's already consumed 3 star systems on the far rim. Soon it will turn its attention to the core worlds. Sarah sat up on the medical table, her young face carrying wisdom that belonged to someone much older. The Changed Ones are seeding human space with preparation sites. They look human, but they're not anymore. They're building the infrastructure the Devourer will need when it arrives. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. How long do we have? Months, maybe a year at most, Ghost replied. The Devourer moves slowly but inevitably. It prefers to corrupt worlds from within before revealing itself. What can I do to help? Elena asked, surprising herself with her immediate offer. Ghost turned toward her, and for a moment Elena thought she saw gratitude behind the dark helmet. Keep studying human genetics and consciousness transfer technology. When the time comes, we may need to change people to save them. And Elena, if you encounter anyone exhibiting unusual abilities or knowledge they shouldn't possess, contact me immediately. Ghost handed Elena a communication device unlike anything she'd ever seen. It felt warm to the touch and seemed to pulse with its own inner light. This will reach me anywhere in human space, but be careful who you trust. The Devourer's servants look exactly like us until it's too late. As Ghost prepared to leave with young Sarah, Elena felt compelled to ask one more question. Rebecca, why haven't you told Fleet Command about this threat? They need to know what's coming. Ghost paused at the airlock, Sarah's small hand clasped firmly in hers. Because the Devourer's influence has already reached into the highest levels of human government. Until I know who can be trusted, I have to work alone. The revelation hit Elena like a physical blow. If Ghost was right, then humanity's own leaders might be compromised, preparing their species for consumption by an ancient evil. As the impossible ship vanished into the void, carrying its precious cargo to safety, Elena began to understand the true scope of the war they were fighting. The Kethrans were just a distraction. The real enemy was already among them, wearing human faces and planning humanity's destruction from within. She activated her research computers and began compiling everything she knew about recent changes in Fleet Command personnel. If Ghost was gathering allies for the fight ahead, Elena intended to be ready to help identify both friends and enemies in the battle for humanity's soul. Commander Zara Voss discovered the truth about humanity's infiltration during what should have been a routine strategy meeting at Fleet Headquarters on Earth. Admiral Chen was reviewing defense plans for the outer colonies when Deputy Admiral Harrison, recently promoted to the High Command, made a suggestion that sent ice through Zara's veins. We should consider strategic withdrawal from the rim worlds, Harrison said, his voice carrying its usual administrative calm. Concentrate our forces around the core systems where we can establish stronger defensive positions. On the surface, it was a reasonable military strategy. But Zara had spent months studying Ghost's warnings about the Devourer's infiltration tactics. Abandoning the outer colonies would leave millions of civilians defenseless and create exactly the kind of chaos and desperation that ancient Predator would exploit. Sir, with respect, evacuating the rim worlds would be a logistical nightmare, Zara interjected. The civilian population alone numbers in the tens of millions. Harrison's eyes fixed on her with interest that seemed oddly intense. Sacrifices must be made for the greater good, Commander. Surely you understand the mathematics of warfare. Something in his tone made Zara's skin crawl. She'd heard that same clinical detachment before, in the voice of a Kethran interrogator during her brief captivity 3 months earlier. But this was worse. The interrogator had been genuinely alien. Harrison looked completely human while radiating something fundamentally wrong. After the meeting, Zara activated the communication device Ghost had given Dr. Vasquez, who had passed it to her during a seemingly routine medical conference. The device hummed to life with warmth that seemed almost alive. Ghost, this is Voss. We need to talk. Priority Alpha. The response came within minutes. Coordinates transmitting. Come alone and tell no one where you're going. The coordinates led Zara to an abandoned mining facility in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. As her shuttle approached the designated location, space shimmered and Ghost's impossible ship materialized, its hull reflecting the distant stars like black water. Inside the vessel, Zara found herself in what appeared to be a command center that defied geometric logic. Screens displayed star charts that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, and the air hummed with energy that made her teeth ache. Ghost stood with her back turned, observing a holographic display that showed human space marked with clusters of red indicators. When she turned around, Zara gasped. For the first time, Ghost had removed her helmet. Rebecca Mason looked exactly as she had 5 years ago, except for her eyes. They were the same solid black as the child Sarah's, like looking into the depths of space itself. But behind that alien darkness, Zara could still see the humanity that made her a guardian rather than a predator. "You've noticed something," Rebecca said. It wasn't a question. "Deputy Admiral Harrison. There's something wrong with him. The way he talks, the suggestions he makes. He's pushing strategies that would leave civilians vulnerable." Rebecca nodded grimly. "Harrison was replaced 6 months ago. The real man is probably dead, his body consumed and his memories absorbed. What sits in Fleet Command now is a holo wearing his face." The holographic display shifted, showing surveillance footage of various high-ranking military and civilian leaders. Red markers appeared over dozens of faces indicating suspected infiltration. "It's worse than we feared," Rebecca continued. "The Devourer has been ceding key positions throughout human space for over 2 years. Politicians, military commanders, research scientists, anyone with the authority to make decisions that affect large populations." Zara studied the display with growing horror. Nearly a quarter of the High Command was marked as compromised or suspected. How can you tell who's been replaced? The Changed Ones retain the host's memories and personality patterns, but they lack genuine emotion. They make decisions based on cold logic that serves the Devourer's agenda rather than human survival instincts. Rebecca activated another display showing the locations where Ghost had found others like herself. The pattern was scattered but deliberate, with each rescue occurring near population centers that had recently experienced unexplained disasters or administrative changes. Every time we save one of the Changed, we learn more about the Devourer's plan. It's not just invasion, Zara. It's consumption on a scale we can barely comprehend. The entity doesn't just want to rule humanity. It wants to absorb every conscious thought and memory our species has ever produced. Young Sarah emerged from what appeared to be a rest area, her appearance healthier than when Zara had heard about her, but those black eyes still carrying depths of knowledge no child should possess. "The network is growing stronger," Sarah said, her voice carrying harmonic frequencies that seemed to bypass Zara's ears and speak directly to her mind. "More of the Changed Ones are awakening to their true purpose. They're preparing infrastructure for the Devourer's arrival." Rebecca placed a protective hand on Sarah's shoulder. "Show her what you showed me about the preparation sites." Sarah approached a control console and placed her small hands on its surface. The holographic display shifted to show underground facilities being constructed beneath major population centers. The architecture was alien, organic curves that suggested something grown rather than built. "These are processing centers," Sarah explained with clinical detachment that was disturbing in someone so young. "When the Devourer arrives, the Changed Ones will herd populations into these facilities for consumption. The entity feeds on consciousness, but it needs specialized infrastructure to digest sentient minds efficiently." Zara felt sick. "How many of these sites are there?" 17 that we've confirmed," Rebecca replied. "Probably dozens more in various stages of construction. Each one can process approximately 50,000 people before requiring regeneration time." The scope of the threat was staggering. If the Devourer's plan succeeded, humanity would face extinction not through conquest but through literal consumption of their very consciousness. "What can we do?" Zara asked. "If the High Command is compromised, who can we trust?" Rebecca's expression hardened with determination. "We build our own network. Officers like you who've had direct contact with the enemy and can recognize the signs of infiltration. Scientists like Dr. Vasquez who understand what we're facing. Civilians who've survived encounters with the Changed Ones." She activated a new display showing a growing network of contacts across human space. The numbers were small but growing, each node representing someone who had chosen to fight against an enemy that most of humanity didn't even know existed. "The Kethrans actually represent an opportunity," Rebecca continued. "Their war is genuine, driven by territorial expansion rather than the Devourer's influence. If we can convince their leadership about the real threat, they could become allies against the entity." Sarah looked up from the console with those unnerving black eyes. The Devourer has already consumed 3 Kethrin colony worlds on the far rim. Their war council believes it was a human weapon. Zara understood immediately. That's why they escalated the conflict. They think we're responsible for whatever destroyed their colonies. Exactly. The entity is playing both sides against each other, weakening potential resistance while its servants prepare the infrastructure for mass consumption. Rebecca moved to a weapons locker and removed equipment that looked like a cross between a scanner and a firearm. Zara, I'm giving you tools that can detect the changed ones and neutralize them if necessary. But more importantly, I need you to identify others we can trust within Fleet Command. The device felt warm in Zara's hands, its surface adapting to her grip like living tissue. How does it work? Point it at someone and it will analyze their neural patterns. Humans show complexity and emotional resonance. The changed ones display organizational patterns that serve the Devourer's consciousness rather than individual personality. As Zara prepared to return to her shuttle, Rebecca caught her arm with surprising gentleness. Zara, be very careful who you trust with this information. The changed ones are learning to mimic human emotional responses more convincingly. Sometimes the only way to be certain is to test their reactions to information about the Devourer itself. Flying back toward Earth, Zara's mind raced with the implications of what she'd learned. Humanity was fighting a war on 2 fronts, but only a handful of people knew about the enemy that posed the true, existential threat. The battle for survival had already begun, and most of her species didn't even realize they were in danger. The Kethrin War Council chamber fell silent as Admiral Kextar presented the intelligence that would change everything. The massive holographic display showed the consumed remains of their colony world Thexadan, once home to 12 million Kethrins, now reduced to empty husks of buildings surrounding organic processing structures that defied classification. Warmaster Thane's forearms trembled with rage as he studied the images. You're certain this was not a human weapon? The energy signatures are unlike anything in human or Kethrin arsenals, Kextar confirmed. But more disturbing are the reports from our few survivors. They describe their people walking willingly into these structures, their minds already changed by something that had been living among them for months. High Strategist Vexara, eldest member of the council, activated her personal display showing comparative analysis data. I have studied human tactical doctrine extensively. They are aggressive but not genocidal. This consumption pattern suggests something far more alien. The chamber erupted in angry chittering as council members debated the implications. Their century of expansion had made the Kethrins confident in their military superiority. But the loss of 3 colony worlds to an unknown enemy had shaken that confidence. There are reports of human vessels in our territory, General Mortek pointed out. Ships that do not match any known human designs. Perhaps they have developed new weapons technology. Before Thane could respond, an aide hurried into the chamber, carrying an emergency communication device. Warmaster, we're receiving a transmission on military frequencies. The source claims to be the human known as Ghost. Thane's mandibles clicked with interest. Ghost had become a legend even among Kethrin forces, the mysterious human pilot whose impossible ship had humiliated their fleet on multiple occasions. Wrote it to the main display. The hologram shifted to show the familiar dark hull of Ghost's vessel floating in space near one of their border outposts. As they watched, the impossible ship materialized what appeared to be a Kethrin survivor pod from its hull, setting it adrift where their patrol ships could recover it. Warmaster Thane, Ghost's voice echoed through the council chamber. I'm returning one of your people. His name is Subcommander Krezeval, sole survivor of the Nexus Station incident. I suggest you listen very carefully to what he has to say. The transmission cut, and Ghost's ship vanished from sensors as mysteriously as it had appeared. Within hours, the survivor pod was aboard the flagship, and Krezeval was brought before the War Council. The young subcommander looked like he had aged decades in the few weeks since Nexus Station's destruction. His normally vibrant chitin had dulled to gray, and his eyes held the haunted look of someone who had seen something beyond comprehension. Tell us what happened at Nexus Station, Thane commanded. Krezeval's voice was barely a whisper. It started small. Personnel changes, new arrivals who seemed familiar but felt wrong. They looked like people we knew, but they moved differently, spoke differently. When questioned, they had all the right memories but no emotional connection to them. The council listened with growing unease as Kresval described the slow infiltration of their remote outpost. Changed Kethrins had systematically replaced key personnel while construction crews built strange organic structures in the station's lower levels. The entity revealed itself when the preparations were complete. Kresval continued. It called itself the Devourer, and it was ancient beyond measure. It told us that our species was just one of many it had consumed across the galaxy, that it had been feeding on sentient life since before our sun was born. High Strategist Vexara leaned forward intently. How did you escape? The human ship appeared during the final phase of consumption. Ghost and her companions fought their way through the Changed Ones and extracted me before the entity could complete its work. But War Master, I saw what it did to the others. It didn't just kill them. It absorbed their consciousness, made their thoughts and memories part of itself. War Master Thane's forearms moved in the ritual gesture of deep consideration. The implications of Kresval's testimony were staggering. If true, both Kethrin and human space faced an enemy that made their current conflict seem like a minor territorial dispute. Bring me everything we have on anomalous incidents in our territory over the past 5 years, Thane ordered, and prepare a communication to this ghost. It appears we need to discuss terms. Meanwhile, in human space, Commander Zara Voss was conducting her own investigation into the Devourer's infiltration network, using the scanner Rebecca had given her. She had confirmed that Deputy Admiral Harrison was indeed one of the Changed Ones. But the revelation that chilled her to the bone was discovering how extensive the infiltration had become. Dr. Vasquez, I need you to look at these neural pattern scans, Zara transmitted through Ghost's communication device. I've tested 17 senior officers and 8 of them show the organizational patterns of the Changed Ones. Elena's response carried barely controlled horror.
Zara, I've been analyzing the genetic samples you provided.
These aren't just people who've been influenced by the Devourer. Their cellular structure has been completely rewritten. They're not human anymore. The implications were terrifying. If half of Fleet Command had been replaced by the Devourer's servants, then humanity's defensive strategies were being planned by the enemy itself. Every tactical decision, every resource allocation, every evacuation plan was potentially being designed to serve the entity's consumption agenda. We need to contact Ghost immediately, Zara decided. If the Kethrins are willing to talk, this might be our only chance to build an alliance before the Devourer reveals itself. Ghost's response to the emergency transmission was swift. Meet me at coordinates I'm sending. And Zara, bring everything you've learned about the infiltration. It's time to make some very difficult decisions. The rendezvous point was a hidden facility that Ghost had constructed in the asteroid belt, larger and more sophisticated than anything Zara had expected. The station housed not just Ghost and young Sarah, but 7 other individuals with the same black eyes and otherworldly presence. This is our command center, Rebecca explained as she led Zara through corridors lined with technology that seemed to grow from the walls rather than being installed. Everyone here is someone the Devourer tried to change but who broke free before the transformation was complete. In the central planning room, holographic displays showed the scope of the threat in devastating detail. Red markers indicated confirmed Devourer activity across both human and Kethrin space, while amber indicators showed suspected infiltration sites. The pattern revealed a web of corruption that spanned the galaxy. The entity has been active for much longer than we realized, Rebecca said. Archaeological evidence suggests it's been consuming civilizations for millions of years. Each species it devours makes it stronger, more intelligent, more capable of corruption. Sarah approached one of the displays, her young hands manipulating controls with practiced ease. The Kethrins have agreed to a meeting. War Master Thane wants to discuss alliance terms? Zara felt a mixture of hope and terror. An alliance with the Kethrins would provide the military resources needed to fight the Devourer, but it would also mean revealing the full scope of humanity's compromise to former enemies. What if the Changed Ones in Fleet Command learn about the alliance? Zara asked. They could sabotage it before it begins. Rebecca's expression hardened with determination. Then we make sure they don't get the chance. Zara, I need you to return to Earth and begin identifying every loyal officer you can trust. When the Devourer makes its final move, we'll need people in position to resist from within. One of the other changed humans, a man who introduced himself as Marcus, stepped forward. The entity is accelerating its timeline. Our psychic connection to it tells us that something has made it impatient. The processing centers are nearing completion. The revelation hit Zara like a physical blow. They were running out of time. Soon the Devourer would drop its pretense of secrecy and begin the final phase of consumption. When that happened, both human and Kethran civilizations would face extinction, unless they could stand together against an enemy that had devoured countless worlds before them. As Zara prepared to return to Earth with her new understanding of the threat, Rebecca made a decision that would change the course of the war. "It's time to reveal ourselves to both governments," she announced. "The Devourer's infiltration is too extensive to fight from the shadows anymore. We need to force a confrontation before it's ready." The final battle for the galaxy's sentient species was about to begin, and Rebecca Mason, the pilot who had become something more than human, was ready to step out of the shadows and lead the fight against an ancient evil that had already consumed too many worlds to count. The joint Human-Kethran summit took place aboard a neutral station at the edge of contested space, with representatives from both species gathering under circumstances none could have imagined months before. Admiral Chen led the human delegation, carefully selected by Zara to include only officers whose loyalty had been verified by Ghost's scanners. War Master Thane commanded the Kethran contingent, his forearms bearing ritual scars that indicated his willingness to die for his people's survival. The tension in the conference chamber was thick enough to cut with a blade when Ghost's impossible ship materialized directly beside the station without triggering any security alarms. The vessel docked with casual precision that demonstrated technology far beyond either species' current capabilities. When the airlock opened, Rebecca Mason walked into the chamber without her helmet for the first time in public since her transformation. The gasps from both delegations were audible as they saw her black eyes and the subtle wrongness that marked her as something between human and alien. "My name is Rebecca Mason," she announced, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in dimensions beyond normal hearing. "5 years ago, I was a test pilot for the human fleet. Today, I'm something else. Something that exists to protect both our species from a threat that makes our current war seem like a playground disagreement." War Master Thane's mandibles clicked with interest rather than hostility. "You are the one called Ghost, the defender who has frustrated our military commanders and rescued our people from the consumption sites." "I am," Rebecca confirmed. "And I'm here to tell you that every battle we've fought, every world we've lost, every strategic decision we've made has been influenced by an entity that views both our species as nothing more than food." She activated holographic displays that filled the chamber with images of the Devourer's work across the galaxy, consumed worlds where organic processing structures grew like cancers among empty cities, documentation of the infiltration networks that had placed the entity's servants in positions of authority throughout both human and Kethran space. "The Devourer has been planning this consumption for decades," Rebecca continued. "It doesn't conquer civilizations. It corrupts them from within, replacing key individuals with creatures that wear familiar faces but serve alien purposes." Admiral Chen studied the displays with growing horror. "How do we know who can be trusted? If this infiltration is as extensive as you claim, anyone could be compromised." Young Sarah stepped forward from where she had been standing near Rebecca. To the assembled delegates, she looked like an ordinary human child except for her eyes. When she spoke, her voice carried knowledge that belonged to someone much older. "We can identify the changed ones through neural pattern analysis," Sarah explained. "But the real question is whether your governments are willing to accept the truth about how deeply they've been compromised." War Master Thane activated his personal communication device and spoke rapidly in the Kethran military dialect. Within minutes, his aide confirmed what Rebecca's intelligence had already suggested. 3 members of our high command have been replaced within the past year, Thane reported grimly. The real individuals disappeared during routine inspections of outer colonies. Their replacements have been advocating strategies that would concentrate our population centers for what they claimed were defensive purposes. Admiral Chen felt ice form in her stomach. "The same recommendations we've been receiving from our own high command. Deputy Admiral Harrison has been pushing for civilian relocations to fortified worlds, gathering populations for efficient processing," Rebecca confirmed. "The Devourer has learned from consuming previous civilizations. It no longer simply attacks worlds at random. It guides potential prey into situations that serve its feeding requirements. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Both species had been manipulated into a war that served the Devourer's purposes, while their real enemy prepared to consume them both. "What do you propose?" Thane asked finally. Rebecca's expression hardened with determination.
Immediate identification and neutralization of all compromised individuals in positions of authority.
Joint military operations to destroy the processing centers before they become operational, and preparation for the entity's arrival, because our activities will force it to reveal itself sooner than planned. "You're talking about starting a civil war within both our governments," Admiral Chen pointed out. "We're talking about preventing the extinction of consciousness itself," Rebecca replied. "The Devourer doesn't just consume biological matter. It absorbs thoughts, memories, the essence of what makes a being sentient. Every person it processes becomes part of its collective intelligence." Sarah approached the central display and placed her small hands on the control surface. The hologram shifted to show real-time monitoring of Devourer activity across the galaxy. "The entity is already moving," she announced. "Long-range sensors detect massive energy signatures approaching from the galactic rim. It knows we've discovered its network and it's accelerating the final phase." War Master Thane's 4 arms moved in gestures of command authority. "How long do we have?" "Weeks, possibly days," Rebecca answered. "The Devourer travels through dimensions we can barely perceive, but its approach creates gravitational anomalies that our enhanced senses can detect." Admiral Chen activated her emergency communication protocols. "I'm ordering immediate recall of all fleet elements to Sol system. If we're going to fight this thing, we need every ship we can get. And I will do the same for our forces," Thane declared. "But first we must deal with the compromised individuals in our commands. They will attempt to sabotage any defensive preparations." Rebecca nodded approval. "My team has developed weapons specifically designed to neutralize the Changed Ones. The technology disrupts the quantum entanglement that connects them to the Devourer's consciousness, essentially cutting their link to the entity." Handed identical devices to both Chen and Thane. The weapons felt warm to the touch and seemed to pulse with their own inner light. "These will identify and disable the Changed Ones without harming regular humans or Kethrans," Rebecca explained. "But be warned, once you begin using them, the entity will know that its network has been discovered. It may abandon subtlety and move to direct assault." Commander Zara Voss, who had been monitoring the proceedings through her communication link, reported troubling developments from Earth. "Admiral, I'm detecting unusual activity around the Fleet Command building. It looks like the compromised officers are implementing some kind of emergency protocol." Rebecca's enhanced senses immediately picked up the implications. "They're activating the processing centers early. We need to move now." The summit dissolved into urgent action as both delegations prepared to return to their respective governments and begin the dangerous process of rooting out the Devourer's servants. But as they departed, Sarah caught Rebecca's arm with a grip that was stronger than any child should possess. "Rebecca, the Devourer is learning from our resistance. It's adapting faster than we anticipated. The approaching entity isn't just the original consciousness anymore. It's merged with the collective intelligence of every civilization it's consumed." Rebecca felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's environmental systems. They weren't just fighting an ancient predator anymore. They were facing the combined knowledge and cunning of hundreds of extinct species, all focused on the singular goal of consuming everything that thought and dreamed in the galaxy. The final battle was about to begin, and humanity and the Kethrans would need every advantage they could find to survive against an enemy that had never known defeat. Rebecca Mason, the test pilot who had become something more than human, prepared to lead both species in a war that would determine whether consciousness itself had a future in their galaxy. As the delegations departed to begin their desperate preparations, space around the neutral station began to distort in ways that suggested something vast and hungry was drawing closer with each passing moment. The Devourer arrived like a wound in reality itself, tearing through the fabric of space-time at the edge of the Sol system with a violence that sent gravitational waves rippling across human space. Rebecca Mason felt its approach through senses that existed partially outside normal dimensions. The entity's presence pressing against her consciousness like ice-cold fingers probing. the edges of her mind. "It's here," she announced to the combined human Catherine fleet that had assembled around Earth. Nearly 2,000 ships from both species hung in formation, their crews united by necessity against an enemy that threatened the existence of consciousness itself. Admiral Chen's voice crackled across the communication channels from her flagship. "All ships report ready status. Weapons armed, shields at maximum." War Master Thane's response came from the Catherine battlecruiser Thunder of Suns. "Our warriors are prepared to die with honor. But first we will make this ancient evil remember why it should fear the combined fury of thinking beings." The Devourer's physical form defied easy description. It appeared to be constructed from the crystallized thoughts of the civilizations it had consumed. A massive entity that shifted between dimensions with each movement. Organic structures pulsed along its surface. Processing centers that had once been used to consume entire worlds now serving as weapon systems capable of breaking down matter at the quantum level. Fleet Dispersal Pattern Omega. Rebecca commanded through the tactical network she had established between the enhanced humans and their allies. Don't let it focus its consumption beams on concentrated groups. The battle began with the Devourer's attempt to establish psychic dominance over the assembled fleet. Waves of alien consciousness washed over the ships, carrying the accumulated despair of 1,000 extinct species. Lesser beings would have been overwhelmed by the sheer weight of hopelessness. But humans and Catherines had something the entity had never encountered before. "All ships, maintain communication discipline," Rebecca broadcast. "Remember what you're fighting for. Your families, your worlds, your right to exist as free-thinking beings." Commander Zara Voss, leading a squadron of enhanced fighters, felt the Devourer's mental assault like icy needles in her brain. But alongside the alien despair came something else. The shared determination of every pilot in her unit. Human and Catherine alike, all linked through the communication network Rebecca had created. "Squadron 7, attack run on the entity's forward processing clusters," Zara commanded. "Sarah, are you reading the target data?" Young Sarah, now serving as the fleet's tactical coordinator through her enhanced connection to the Devourer's consciousness, responded with information that would have been impossible for normal sensors to detect. "The processing structures are vulnerable to quantum disruption weapons for approximately 30 seconds. After each consumption cycle," she reported. "I can predict the timing, but you'll need to be precise." The combined fleet moved with coordination that should have been impossible, given the language barriers and traditional hostilities between the species. But Rebecca's communication network allowed for instantaneous sharing of tactical information and emotional support, creating a collective consciousness that served life rather than consumption. Catherine battlecruisers opened fire with plasma cannons that had been modified with human quantum targeting systems. Human fighters darted between the Devourer's defensive appendages, their weapons enhanced with Catherine energy amplification technology. The fusion of both species' capabilities created a fighting force more effective than either could have managed alone. But the Devourer was learning. "It's adapting to our tactics faster than anticipated," Dr. Elena Vasquez reported from her research vessel positioned at the edge of the battle zone. "The entity is incorporating the strategic knowledge of every civilization it's consumed. We're not just fighting one enemy. We're fighting the combined military genius of hundreds of extinct species." The ancient entity began deploying weapon systems that nobody in the fleet had ever encountered. Reality warping beams that aged ships centuries in seconds. Temporal distortion fields that trapped vessels in loops of accelerated time. Dimensional portals that transported attacking craft into the heart of the entity, where they could be consumed directly. "Fleet casualties mounting," Admiral Chen reported. "We've lost 30% of our force and we're barely scratching its outer defenses." Rebecca felt the weight of command pressing down on her enhanced consciousness. Every ship lost represented hundreds of lives, each one a unique perspective that would be lost forever if the Devourer succeeded. But she also sensed something else through her connection to the entity. "It's not invulnerable," she announced to the fleet. "The Devourer draws power from the consciousness it has consumed. But maintaining coherence across so many absorbed minds requires enormous energy. If we can disrupt its internal organization, we can create a cascade failure." Sarah's voice cut through the tactical chatter with urgent intensity. "Rebecca, I'm detecting a weakness in the entity's consciousness matrix. The absorbed civilizations aren't perfectly integrated. There are points of resistance where some personalities are still fighting against absorption. Rebecca understood immediately. All enhanced humans prepare for psychic assault. We're going into the entity's consciousness directly. That's suicide, War Master Thane protested. Your minds will be consumed like all the others. Maybe, Rebecca acknowledged. But we're the only ones who can survive contact with the Devourer's consciousness long enough to reach those resistance points. Sarah, can you guide us to the strongest concentration of unabsorbed personalities? I can feel them, Sarah replied, her young voice carrying ancient sorrow. They're deep in the entity's core consciousness, still fighting after centuries of absorption. If we can reach them, amplify their resistance. The plan was desperate beyond measure. Rebecca and her 7 enhanced companions would project their consciousness directly into the Devourer's mind, while the fleet maintained its physical assault. They would attempt to contact the unabsorbed personalities and organize them into a rebellion that could tear the entity apart from within. All ships, maintain attack patterns, Rebecca commanded as she prepared for the psychic assault. Whatever happens to us, don't let that thing reach Earth or any inhabited world. The moment Rebecca's consciousness touched the Devourer's mind, she was overwhelmed by the sheer scale of its mental architecture. Millions of absorbed personalities formed a vast network of enslaved thoughts, each one stripped of individual identity and forced to serve the entity's hunger. But deeper in the matrix, she found what Sarah had detected. Pockets of resistance where strong-willed individuals from consumed civilizations had never fully surrendered their identity. They were few compared to the vast numbers of the absorbed, but their defiance burned like stars in the darkness of the entity's consciousness. Who are you? Came a voice that might have belonged to a member of a species extinct for millennia. How do you maintain coherence in this place of dissolution? I'm Rebecca Mason, she replied, her consciousness touching those of her companions as they navigated the psychic maze. We're here to offer you a choice. Help us destroy this thing from within, or remain prisoners forever. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Thousands of absorbed personalities that had been hiding their true selves for centuries suddenly blazed with renewed hope and fury. The rebellion began as a whisper, but quickly grew into a roar that shook the foundations of the Devourer's consciousness. The effect on the physical entity was immediate and catastrophic. Its coordinated movements became erratic as internal conflicts disrupted its thought processes. Weapon systems misfired or shut down entirely, as the absorbed personalities sabotaged the entity's control mechanisms. All ships, focus fire on the processing clusters, Admiral Chen commanded as she recognized the opportunity. The entity is destabilizing. The combined fleet pressed their attack with renewed intensity. Quantum disruption weapons tore through the Devourer's defenses while the internal rebellion grew stronger with each passing moment. Ancient civilizations that had been consumed across the galaxy joined forces in a final act of defiance against their captor. Inside the entity's consciousness, Rebecca felt the moment when the rebellion reached critical mass. The Devourer's attempts to maintain control over its absorbed victims failed, as centuries of suppressed rage and determination exploded into coordinated resistance. It's working, Sarah announced through the psychic link. The entity is losing coherence. But Rebecca, if you stay in there much longer, you'll be caught in the collapse. Rebecca made a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her existence. She chose to remain within the Devourer's consciousness, using her enhanced abilities to coordinate the rebellion and ensure the entity's complete destruction. Her last transmission to the fleet was filled with quiet determination. Tell them my name was Rebecca Mason. Tell them I kept my promise to protect humanity. The Devourer's death scream echoed across multiple dimensions as its consciousness matrix collapsed entirely. The ancient entity that had consumed civilizations across the galaxy for millions of years died not from external assault, but from the combined will of its victims finally breaking free. As Timio, the entity's physical form disintegrated into quantum foam. The freed consciousness of countless extinct civilizations blazed briefly across space before fading into whatever awaited beyond death. Among them, barely perceptible but unmistakably present, was the light that had been Rebecca Mason. The combined human-Catherine fleet watched in awed silence as the last traces of the Devourer vanished from existence. They had won a victory that would echo across the galaxy, But the cost had been higher than anyone had imagined. Commander Zara Voss transmitted the final battle report to both governments. But when asked for the name of the pilot who had saved both species, she could only repeat Rebecca's final words. Her call sign was Ghost, Zara said. And that's how she'll be remembered. The guardian who appeared when needed most and disappeared when her duty was done. In the years that followed, human and Kethran space knew unprecedented peace. The two species, united by their shared victory against extinction, built an alliance that would protect the galaxy against future threats. But in quiet moments when veteran pilots gathered to share stories of the war, they would speak of the mysterious defender who had saved them all. They never learned her real name, but her call sign dominated every war story, every memorial, every legend passed down to new generations. Ghost became more than a pilot or a person. She became a symbol of the principle that consciousness itself was worth any sacrifice to preserve. And sometimes on dark nights between the stars, young pilots swore they could still hear her voice on the communication channels, watching over them from whatever realm awaited those who gave everything to protect the light of thinking minds in an often hostile universe.